to look at the political context of I think, the quite watershed events on Saturday in Albert Park. And he joins us often. He's head of the Democracy Project. He's a political lecturer at Victoria University. His name's Bryce Edwards, and he joins us now. Bryce, how are you?
Good morning, Sean. I'm pretty good. This is all interesting stuff, but it's also a bit depressing, really.
Now, why is it depressing? Isn't it a celebration of the rainbow community and New Zealanders coming together and standing up for freedom and love?
Well, there just seems to be a lot of hate on either side and a lot of dishonesty on, lots of different angles here. And I'm not really seeing, the sort of debate that we need to be having on all these issues. It seems to be more yelling and sort of allegations and things. So, I don't know, it just, it doesn't...
Disheartening.
It's a bit disheartening, yes.
Yeah,
indeed.
okay. Well, Bryce, I guess in typical human fashion, when something annoys us, we go around finding someone to point the finger at and to blame. I'm not sure personally that that's particularly useful, but we do need to understand what has happened. Let's start from the premise, Bryce, that a middle-aged housewife of 4 kids who's got a bit of a social media following in Britain coming to New Zealand to speak on a street corner wouldn't have actually, ruffled a feather, right? And under normal circumstances.
Well, it just speaks to the heightened kind of culture wars that we're having over transgender issues that, if this had happened 10 years ago, if this person had come, it wouldn't have, it wouldn't have ruffled any feathers. There wouldn't have been any protest. This person would have given their speech. Interested people would have come along and listened. She would have gone away. And end of story. And, she probably has some useful things to contribute to the debate. But
are you allowed to say that, Bryce? Are you allowed to say that?
Oh, look, everyone's got some useful things to contribute to the debate. And I just think in the end, we just have to have debate and we have to look for the good in both sides. And we've got to, listen to people. I would listen to her. I'm sure there's things I would disagree with her, but that's not important. The thing is to, actually have some goodwill and good faith, and that's not what happened in the weekend, unfortunately.
No, it's not. Why didn't that happen in the weekend?
Because we have a culture, I think, in New Zealand at the moment, and globally, sure, of not listening, of wanting to be outraged, wanting to shut down conversations, and it's, I think it happens on lots of sides at the moment. It's not just the gender protesters that were there on Saturday, it's the politicians as well. And so, this is going to be the outcome, that we have greater kind of polarisation and hate, and it's. I guess
what's
my
the violence
worry is
Bryce, let's be honest about what happened in Albert Park. Let's take Destiny Church or Vision New Zealand or whatever Hana Tamaki's outfit are and take them out of it because they were holding a separate event. The violence and the hatred was all pretty well one way, wasn't it, on Saturday?
I think what happened in Albert Park, absolutely, you're right. There's a use of force on one side, and that just gets very sad when that happens. I think it's
by one side, by the rainbow or trans community.
There were protesters there. I don't know to what extent they represented that community, because that's always the situation we get in these protests, is that you have some people that are doing abhorrent things, and does that reflect the rest of the protesters? I don't know if that was the case. I hope not. And I see it time and time again in protests where some people go beyond what is acceptable, and then the rest of the protests get tarred with that.
Okay. Where do should our police stand in situations like this?
It's a difficult role for the police, but they have to keep order. They have to, that's I think, the main thing in politics. They have to keep order rather than getting too involved in choosing who's right and who's wrong and all those sort of things. And so I don't know how Saturday's incident came to be the debacle it was.
Oh, well, have you not been reading social media, Bryce? Or listening listening to Jonathan Ailing, who I just spoke to?
No, what I'm saying is that the way it was set up, those two sides shouldn't have been anywhere near each other.
Yeah.
They should have been...
And the police were well aware and did nothing.
Yeah, and I can't understand that. It seems very odd to me. That's not what the police would have normally done in the past with other protests that they know would be likely to lead to conflict. So it just seems very odd. But like I say, I don't know how that protest was organised, why the police didn't have a sort of more central role in arranging things right from the start, and then when things got ugly, keeping order.
Yeah. Bryce, what do you think of the government's response, Prime Minister Hipkins' response yesterday, the walk back by Marama Davidson, the confusion over the motorcycle on the grassy knoll? Has the government responded, do you think, in a way which reassures New Zealanders?
Well, I guess first I'd say that this is very bad news for the government, what's happened. And as we saw with the transition from Jacinda Ardern to a new Prime Minister, we've seen Chris Hipkins really wanting to change the reputation of this government to one that's dealing with...
Because I tell you yesterday, Bryce, he came out to say we're giving more money to solo parents and everything. Gone. I just banged in the question on this. That was all lost. It was back to culture wars.
But you can see how he was trying to negate that. He was saying, we want to focus on the bread and butter. And I think he would have been desperately unhappy with what happened on Saturday. And he does not want his government associated with those sort of culture wars. And the Greens, I think, are a big threat to his agenda of trying to make the government disconnected with culture wars.
Yeah.
And so he tried to hedge things last week, I think, when the whole issue of banning Posey Parker from the country came up. He tried to hedge things by not taking a side, by saying, look, I oppose this person, I don't like her, but she should be able to come into the country. He was trying to sort of say things to both sides, essentially. But I think in the end, the Greens, ended up representing the government at this event, and you had a minister of the government being quite escalating things, really, as we saw, and coming up with quite provocative statements. And that is something that Hipkins will be desperate to, to have walked back. And so he made the minister walk back to some extent. And she's normally very stubborn on these things, but she got the message from Floor 9.
What about this bullshit, traumatised by the motorcycle incident, though? Bryce, no one in the country takes that seriously. That's a lie. It's a fib. It's a fib. Let's use the word fib.
It's curious. I mean, I would say that we've got to have some sympathy for anyone that's hit by a motorcycle. And, if that was, possibly it was an accident, but quite more likely it was part of the escalation of things politically on Saturday. And, you've got to have sympathy for the minister if she was, when she was hit by this. But, it seems quite disingenuous that you then use that
as an excuse. Yeah. What do you think about the police statement we got this morning that says they're investigating stuff, and particularly the motorcycle accidents? It's become like that was the most lawless thing that happened on Saturday.
Oh, no, I think they should. They need to investigate that motorcycle accident.
What about the 70-year-old woman getting punched in the face?
I would hope that's being investigated too.
I hope that was a slightly higher priority than a traffic incident.
Oh, look, I just don't think we can choose which ones are priorities. They all
I think we can, Bryce, and I think the police do.
Well, I don't know. I think there's a role here for the Police Complaints Authority, and apparently complaints have been made to adjudicate on with the role of the police on Saturday and whether they carried out the appropriate thing. And to me, it didn't look like they did. But I would like to see a proper independent investigation to clarify what went on.
Yeah.
So
okay, Bryce. Bryce, bad for Labor. Hipkins clearly uncomfortable yesterday, not being stuck between the devil and the deep Rainbow Sea.
But but frankly, probably quite good for the Greens. Like, what went on there...
They rebrand.
Sort of and a lot of their kind of supporters do want a greater sort of focus on transgender issues, on social justice issues.
Yeah.
They want the Greens to be more outspoken and differentiated from Labour, and that's really what we saw. So, and with what seems to be an escalating culture war, we're going to have the minor parties playing the lead role here. The Greens on one side, ACT, maybe New Zealand First on the other side. All those three parties are going to benefit majorly.
Yeah. And if Chris Hipkins wasn't clear about his belief in free speech, the rule of law and protecting women yesterday, Chris Luxon's hardly taken advantage of it. He's also being very careful, isn't he?
Yeah, both major parties really want the debate this year to be around things like the economy and, housing, inequality, even climate change. Whereas, I think Luxon's, ever since he took over, he's wanted to shift National away from where it was going under Simon Bridges and then particularly Judith Collins of questioning some of these cultural issues. I think National's perceived that Collins made National a bit too toxic, maybe a bit too conservative on these issues, and so he's trying to be more centrist. I don't know. They must know what they're doing with that. It surprises me a bit because I would have thought there's some questions here that a Conservative Party or any opposition party could be confronting the government about, but he seems to be stepping away from it.
Yeah. I don't think there's any way, Bryce, personally, that you could see Saturday's anything but a backward step for free speech and political debate in New Zealand. I'm going to ask you a very personal question. I hope you can answer it honestly. Are you free to say what you think on this issue, given that you work at a very liberal university?
All universities are liberal at the moment. There's nothing particular about my university in that regard. But look, these are highly sensitive issues on campuses at the moment. Campuses are kind of at the forefront of a lot of these culture war issues.
You got a guy, Eddie Smith or someone who's really into this?
Oh, Eddie Clark from
Victoria University.
From the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, there's very heightened sensitivities and...
So is that a no, Bryce? You really can't say... Are you afraid, Bryce, that you might fall on the wrong side of this and the rainbow tick mob will come for you?
I think all participants need to be very careful about...
That's a yes, Bryce.
Being singled out.
That's a yes, isn't it?
I think that...
Well, is it a yes or not, Bryce?
Well, of course, I'm always worried about not being cancelled, of course. And if you noticed at the parliamentary protest last year, I went along to that, not as someone that is siding with those protesters, but someone who wanted to understand what they were going on, to observe, participate. And I wanted to feed back, some of that to the public.
And how did you get treated after that?
I got on a huge amount of trouble because of that.
What do you mean trouble?
Well, you get demands for you to lose your job. You get demands for you to no longer be used in the media, and people quite disingenuously trying to paint you as being on the side of the protesters or being anti-vax, which obviously I'm not, or being a lot of things, and so. Yeah. So
you might get labelled a TERF if you say what you think or you get too close to this issue, Bryce.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, you look around and see how many other academics are commenting on any of these issues. Pretty much zero, unless they're throwing in their side with kind of orthodoxy on these things in the media and campus. No, you don't really.
Do you know how disturbing what you're telling me is, mate?
Well, I think we're all disturbed by the climate at the moment. There is rising...
You're telling me that our universities, and I'm sorry, Bryce, I've got great respect for you. One of the reasons I have you on the show a lot is that I think you have a wonderful ability to be dispassionate, to still be human, and look at politics. But you're telling me you're afraid.
Well, I'm non-partisan. I don't side with any political party. I have my own views on various issues. I have my own ideologies. But if you get too involved in some of these battles, and I
so
I
you
don't
are
want to
afraid of telling your truth, of speaking freely, Bryce. That's what I'm getting to. That's what I'm driving at. You have reservations about speaking as freely as you otherwise might.
I always have those reservations. When as soon as you become a teacher, you have to be very careful. I think things are more heightened now than they've been at any time in my career. So that's for sure. So I'm a bit more guarded, shall we say, or a lot more guarded than on certain things, and careful to communicate very clearly on these things, not to say things that can be twisted, because they will by opponents that might dislike me for various reasons. They will jump on to something I communicate badly or something and try and twist it. So yes, of course.
Do you get a hard time for coming on the platform, Bryce?
I do, because there's a suggestion that I'm in some way supportive of other views on the platform. I just come on because I will go on to any debate, any media that will have me, and it's sort of the platform that these days will have me more than any other media organisation. But I think debate, I think discussion is always the way forward on these things. And, I think it would be probably smart strategically for me to turn down all invitations to come on the platform. But I don't, because that's just too, I just think that if I start doing that, that is, just totally giving in to the
Yeah, you've got more guts than Luxon, and you've got more guts than the Prime Minister, who was over on ZB today pussyfooting with Hoskins. Bryce, look, I want to keep inviting you. We don't always agree. You sometimes give counterpoints, but that's why it's so bloody good to have you on. And it saddens me to think that you live in any way in a climate of fear for simply speaking your mind. Thank you for the overview today. I hope we have you on again if you're not cancelled.